Now, when you talk about cherubs in connection to the glory of God, now, in the hierarchy of the cherubim, you will see that the highest are the cherubs with 4 faces. Now, that means that these particular 4 cherubims of living creatures, all right, are the only ones that have the spiritual responsibility of access and contact with the glory of God, as seen in chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel. Of course, you see in chapter 10 too. Then also as seen in chapter 4 of the book of Revelations. Now, these 4 living creatures are the only 4 that have that level of access, and that is their responsibility. Now, because of their proximity to the glory of God, they are referred to as the chariots of God. Now, in chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel, now we see these 4 living creatures, all right, each having 4 wheels, beside them. Now, it's important that we understand what actually happened there. Now, what happened in chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel is that it wasn't just the throne of God, all right, but the throne room of God, all right, was brought close enough for Ezekiel to experience. That is why the wheels were seen. The wheels are the spiritual, of course, chariots in connection to the 4 living creatures that pulled, as it were, the throne room of God to that spiritual place and plane from whence Ezekiel could interact. Now, that's why you read throughout the whole scriptures, you don't hear of the wheels anymore. Now, in that dispensation, in that era, in that dispensation, there was no way Ezekiel could have had that kind of access to the throne room of God. He couldn't. There was no way he could come into the throne room of God. So what God did was that God brought his throne room close enough to Ezekiel for him to bring forth words to Ezekiel. That was what happened. All right. So that was the essence of the 4 living creatures and the 4 wheels. They were used by God to bring his throne room. So what they carried was the whole of God's throne room. Now, such that the difference that exists between that interaction, the interaction of Ezekiel, and that of John, is that John was brought into the throne room, while Ezekiel had an experience where the throne room came to him. So Ezekiel was having an experience with the throne room from outside the throne room, while John had an experience with the throne room from within the throne room. So the 4 living creatures, all right, and the 4 wheels were the spiritual, vehicle with which the throne room of God was pulled and drawn and driven to that spiritual, place for Ezekiel to experience. Now, having said that, it's also important that cherubs generally are guardians of the glory of God. Now, we understand that the glory of God is not just light, it isn't just brightness. Now, for the cherubs, every of the cherubim, as guardians or custodians or keepers, have specific measures, all right, or allotment of the wisdom and the glory of God that is apportioned to them. Now, the measure of the glory of God, the measure of the wisdom of God that is allotted to them to steward is the measure of the glory of God that they are given to guard. Now, as far as cherubs are concerned, that measure of the wisdom of God, that measure of the purposes and the counsel of God, as far as they are concerned, is the measure of the glory of God that they are given a spiritual responsibility to guard